Hello, craftsmen and women. This is Eric Jacobson. This is my series on modeling and sculpting environments for video games. Video for organic sculpting. Today we're going to go over organic rock sculpting, the world famous God of War rocks, blending architecture and rocks, the use of sets, and we're just going to do a little wrap up. And at the end, I have another little special treat for you, the alternate ending for God of War Ascension. Don't get too excited. It's not that fantastic. Let's look at our concept one more time before we get started on this rock. I have my directionality that I've kind of indicated in this super rough Maya modeling. I know I want to try to blend this stuff together. I got the stairs going on there. I think I'm just going to go ahead and get started. I don't care at all about this model. I mean, it can be mush, and that's fine with me when it comes to organic stuff. All I need is just the general shape. I'm just going to go ahead and divide that thing up and get started. And I'm going to rely heavily on my clay tubes to add and subtract mass. And I want to just make big changes here. I'm going to start paying attention first to my blending with the column. I want to make sure that it feels like it's the rock is part of that column as well. And I'm just sort of feeling this thing out at first. For rocks, I like a little bit of a rough surface to start. If it's too clean, it bothers me. Kind of like when you're drawing, you want kind of a mid-tone color. That's me for sculpting. I like it to look just a little bit rough and remove the detail out. So I'm gonna make some big changes here and just translate giant chunks out, move all this stuff around. I'm gonna be super rough with it at first. And it's nice to have it in ZBrush now. In Maya, I don't think I could have made these changes in Maya. I guess I still could go back. The reason I like this though is I can see my almost final sculpt as a whole. I look at I've got my decimated versions of the rest of it, and I can kind of make changes based on those details. I want it to match up and blend. So this whole first part of the process is really just I'm just going to go and rough all this stuff up and feel out maybe a few other masses in here than other than just the ones I created in Maya. I want to have large, medium, and small shapes always in an environment that helps to set scale. And so for this this big rock piece, I probably only have large shapes. So I want to go ahead and cut it up a little bit and make it interesting. I want to look at the composition as a whole and kind of balance this stuff out. And also I want it to match those columns. That's probably the most important thing for me. I'm working in Matcap Red, which I usually don't like to do. I feel like you see extra detail that's not really there. I like to look at just a super basic material. I feel like that if it looks good there, then it's going to look good in the game. So I can go ahead and continually Dynamesh this thing now. I don't have to worry so much about keeping those creased edges, maybe like I would on the architecture. The architecture had to be very precise and careful. I'd set up creased edges in Maya, and I wanted to retain those all the time, which is why I had to go back and project my old mesh onto my new one to retain those crisp edges. For this organic thing right at this stage right now, I don't care. I can just go ahead and Dynamesh even at a fairly low resolution. I'm just doing the big block out stuff here, and I can be really rough and pull these things out and just continually marquee drag with my Dynamesh on and go ahead and Dynamesh as I go. This is also kind of a tricky part up here. I am going to have to figure out how the stairs match this thing. I think I'm just going to have it. I'm not going to worry too much about a border. A lot of times a border is the solution, but since this is rock and up on top there, I think I might just have it meet flat and put some rubble or something there. I'm not sure. Yeah, and I'm definitely going to have to worry about where that broken part is on the steps as well. Notice I kind of zoom out a little bit here, and I'm looking at it as a whole, kind of the composition as a whole. I'm just going to speed up this next part here. Really, it's just doing the same process of zooming out, making sure I don't look too close to the details, making sure the composition is correct and interesting, and that from that that money shot I have a cool profile and silhouette, and it supports the rest of the architecture, and then just dynameshing. So now I've kind of got an overall shape. I'm going to start being a little bit more specific about my cuts. And again, I'm still going to be force myself to stay far away from the model and not zoom in and worry about details. I'm using my planer cut shallow, which is a nice and rough cut. I kind of am still just worried about those big shapes, but I'm being slightly more specific about it now, other than just massing it out. I'm cutting away and paying attention to those original directional shapes we did in Maya. I want to retain those, and I want to make sure that I can kind of reinforce those here. And here now I want to be a little bit more specific also about the stairs and where the stairs meet the rock, and also where the damage is. But again, I'm keeping these like nice big planes with my planer cut shallow. I can always go back and add those details. Remember, Surface Mimic and all these other alphas. I can always go back and add that reality based detail. This is about composition, shape, and supporting the rest of my structure. Let's see. it's too. Oh, I forgot to crank up the detail. I got to divide this guy up a little bit more. Okay, that's better. So now I think I'm going to go ahead and start adding in the reality-based details. I want all of I want my mask, and no, I think I want to be a little bit more heavy-handed, especially now early in the beginning. I want to create some interesting shapes. I can go ahead and go a little nuts with this now. A lot of times on the architecture, I need to be careful because I didn't want the walls to warble too much. It stops looking like architecture at some point if it shifts too much. But with this rock, I think if it moves around like that, I think it actually can add interesting shapes and add something new. So, and again, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna remove the same process all along, guys. Go back, remove the detail, and enhance the details that I really want. Stylize it a bit. And now that it's a giant noisy mess, I'm gonna go back and clean this thing up and sculpt it into something that's much more readable and appealing, and something that doesn't look gross and ugly. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and so whenever I see two rocks that kind of join together and they have that, you can see that my creases there where they look doughy. I see that every time in models, and I think it looks terrible. It doesn't look like two rocks kind of jammed together or sitting together. They don't melt together like that. There should be nice, crisp edges, and we're gonna get some of those crisp edges with our rock set, where I'm just gonna go ahead and jam rocks into other rocks in a sensible and meaningful way, with some thought, so they don't look completely jammed in there. But other than having two different subtools, a lot of times you have to really play up these creases, and I think that's the key to really good sculpt is controlling your edges. And I know I've brought up the edges before, but at Sony Santa Monica, I feel like we really do pay attention to a lot of our edges, and uh, whether they're soft or hard or crisp or whatever that edge is, it's super important to pay attention to what's going on and make it have that look that you want it to have. Well, one other thing I want to talk about is this is not the way we make God of War rocks. there are, have been up to 15 or 20 environment artists on our team. Usually hovers, I guess it hovers around 10 to 15 or so. And let me tell you, all of these guys, a ton of them have already been art directors. Many of them have been leads on other projects. Some of these guys have been working for 25 years. These guys are all really good, and they all have a little different technique for creating these rocks. Honestly, we can go on for days about rocks at work. We could talk about how they were formed. We could talk about like, oh, was this from a quarry? Was there a river around here? Where is this? What continent is this? What rocks are these from? Are these like the New Zealand rocks? Or are these like rocks from Nepal? We pay attention to a lot of details, and every single environment artist there probably has something different they would teach you and teach me, and they do every day, about what their process is for creating rocks. So when I show you this, certainly this is not the way that we create God of War rocks. This is the way I am doing it, and for this specific project, I like to stylize a little bit heavier than usually God of War is art directed. So this is I guess kind of a meld of God of War style rocks plus what I like a lot, and the process that I like a lot. At this point, I don't know, 80% of the way there. I think I'm just going to go ahead and enhance some of the creases on some of these edges that I want, and enhance some of the cracks and edges. And I need to start getting into some of the stairs and these steps here. But I think it's starting to come along. It's starting to look pretty good, and it still has that directionality that we wanted from the beginning. Let's look at these stairs. I could have made these tileable, I thought it was a little bit more interesting to taper the stairs, and maybe I'd have a little bit of extra detail where the damage is. I just as easily could have made these tileable. I could have done a set of, I don't know, 4 or 5 stairs and just duplicated them down, and I think we would have been fine. We could have had pebbles on top, dust, piles, lots of things we could do to break up the tiling. But I went ahead and made this specific. Why not? It's my project. I'm going to do what I want. Um, Start by removing some of the detail. I just jammed those stairs in there. Just go ahead and remove out the space where we've damaged the stairs. I want to flatten these last. I don't need those last 2 steps, so I'm just going to go ahead and planer cut those just to get rid of them. I'm going to get rid of a little bit more. I want more rock. I want to see that maybe rock transition into the into kind of my circular frame. I think that would look okay. I'm not entirely sure. I can always add an extra border if I needed to, but I think I want to see some of that chunky rock right up against the frame. I'm not going to worry too much about it right now. I think it's enough. I want to go and figure out maybe some of what the look of these stairs are. They're going to be more rocky or more architectural, like where they fall on that scale, that sliding scale, the blend between the rest of the piece. I think I just want them to be fairly architectural, as far as like not too wobbly and not too rocky, but damaged. It's traversed a lot. People walk up and down this thing all the time, so maybe there's these really big chunks and chips kind of taken out from the edges and the corners of this thing. But it's not rock. This is definitely on the scale. It falls on the architecture side, just heavily chipped and damaged. This is also a lot of really good surface area for those Lord of the Rings cracks that I really like. They're just these nice flat surfaces, and I think your eye is kind of drawn to these flat surfaces. I'm not going to add any kind of decorative element to these things. I mean, you always could, but I want them to be kind of just a nice and flat and clean. So I'm going to go ahead and add detail with those cracks and kind of go nuts with those, especially right here where all the damage has taken place. This is where, I don't know, whatever, some boulder or something hit it, or through erosion it's fallen away. So I'll place most of my damage around that the right side chunk that's taken out. But I really like these cracks on the steps. I think they read really well, as you know, they're nice flat surfaces. So I'm going to go ahead and add in a bunch of this stuff and sprinkle it in. I do want to add a little bit of the rock noise. I think I'm just going to do it the edges. Maybe like over time, a little bit of dirt had built up, or maybe that, at least they can transition. If they have a rock look, they can kind of transition into the kind of rock rails that I have on the sides, and I'll leave the center mostly clean. I'm going to go ahead and add that same rock detail to the rails. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do with these rails. If I'm going to have them completely blend in with the steps, how damaged they'll be, how much of a rail they'll be. I'm just going to go ahead and add some of this detail and feel it out a little bit. That's kind of cool. I like how the rock blends into the steps. So I don't know. It feels like it could be a nice transition. Like they were carved away out of the rock. They same detail that we had on the kind of bottom architectural columns, where the further down it goes, the rougher it got. I think that's kind of nice here. It could be that they just kind of just barely got the rough architectural form for the rails. Started to get a little more detail in the steps, and then they got to the center of the steps. They're nice, clean, perfect stairs. I've lost a lot of detail shoving all that geo around, so again, Dynamesh, duplicate, duplicate, Dynamesh, project. Get all of those polys back. And now I want to enhance the steps into the damaged piece. I kind of imagine like the stairs, I don't know, extend down there almost uh, like you can see where they chiseled and there where the step actually used to be. Maybe there's just a little bit of an indentation. Still, obviously, very rough rock, but kind of extend that stair shape going down. And then the last kind of bits to this are just figuring out those transitions, all the borders, and I've got still some doughy rock up here, and just go ahead and give it its final shape and final form, and then make sure that it blends fairly nicely in with uh, the frame, the steps, the rails, all of those different elements. I want them all to play nicely and to look like they belong next to each other. The last step is going to be the rock set, and now that I've already set the tone and the look and my process for that first rock piece, these guys should be a snap. It's going to be the exact same process. So divide it up. I don't care if it's blobby. I don't care about crisp edges on this one. Dynamesh it, project it, and I'm going to take the clay tubes and add and remove mass. Same thing, slam on those details, the realistic details, remove those realistic details to clean them up, and then enhance the details like the cracks and whatever that I specifically want. For this guy, I'll do a little different, just to try something a little bit different, a little different process. I'm going to start with those real details and not start with the mass. And I guess that's more just because I don't have a directionality to these things. I don't really care that much about the macro directionality. I just care that they're reusable and they have kind of a blocky shape that I can use in a bunch of different ways. And so when I start with sort of a round piece and add the realistic details, the alpha masks, those are going to start giving me those ideas. So I guess. When I used it for the other one in Maya, I was giving it directionality, and that kind of gave me a place to start. And I don't really have a place to start for these, so this is kind of I guess it is kind of a nice way to get started. Start with those realistic details, and then now I'm going to add the mass on. So, yeah, and yet another different way to do rocks. One of 100. I do need to make sure I have the same look as the other rocks. They do need to fit together. So I sort of masked this thing out, and I want to go ahead and make sure my big shapes are okay. When it's so noisy, sometimes it's hard for me to see the big shapes. So I'll just clean it up and kind of chisel away and create these create all the big shapes and make sure that I'm happy with that stuff. So let me just compare this rock. I probably should have looked at it earlier with the rest compared to the rest of it, but I just look at this thing and make sure that I'm happy with the look of it. It does have that directionality, which I think is a good choice. You know, the entire other rock base has that diagonal directionality, which I always think that looks good. And easily I could use this thing as a flat piece. I could tilt it for that diagonal. I could lift it straight up and down. So I don't know. I think this thing's gonna work. Just add a little bit more of the cracked details. Same like I have on the my other rock base. Okay, I think this is. I think it's pretty good. I think it matches. Again, I could noodle this thing. You can noodle it. I can noodle it for longer. Just make sure we don't have any doughy edges. Make sure we have nice deep crevices, and they look intentional. And I think I think it matches the look of the other one. And now we gotta do the same for our other rock. I don't need quite as much detail in here because it's a smaller rock, but again, I want to make sure this thing's fairly reusable. And this time, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and uh, do the big planes, and then add the detail, the alpha masks. All right. Well, I think these guys are gonna match. I think they're gonna work. I'm gonna go ahead and spread it out a little bit and try it out. I'm gonna put it into the model and see what. Well, there you go. Here's a little test render I did after I put it all back together again. I think it's nice. I think a lot of pieces are working together pretty nicely. There are a few issues though. One is that darn column at the bottom, a kind of warbly column, just doesn't look right. That's what I was talking about when I was saying the architecture. If it shifts around too much, just doesn't look right, and it doesn't look like rock to me either. So we're gonna have to address that somehow. I also need more of my rocks. I think I need to some of the feedback that Nick Reynolds had given me was to add in some more of the rocks just to get those small, medium, and large shapes we talked about. Um, it gives it a little bit more scale and maybe a little. It'll give it a little bit more sense of place. Sprinkle it maybe on the little pebbles on the steps, or maybe on the platform itself. Certainly around the rock base, it needs a little bit more of those large and medium shapes to help it out. Um, you know, there's something kind of boring about the top columns. I mean, not boring as in the vertical; they look nice, but if you look at the silhouette of those columns, um, Luke Berliner had pointed out that it's just straight. I've got a boring silhouette on that top column looking at it from this perspective and then from a few perspectives. So I want to address that silhouette's really important to me. And I think I just want to add a little bit more detail, maybe some kind of lanterns or some kind of prop, just a little extra something on it to give it that kind of, I don't know, 80s metal flair, something that just I don't know, something a Viking would walk up and, why would a Viking go here? Just a little something to give it just an edge maybe. And I think I've got room to sculpt in just a few details, and I maybe along the wall of the upper floor, or maybe on that little triangle of the column for the upper floor. Um, I can add maybe a little detail there, maybe for the frame and that cuts the thing in half. But again, I don't want it to be too noisy. I have to find that balance, and I like those big chunky shapes. I think they read really, really well. So uh, I'm going to go ahead and address a few of those things, and maybe get another critique, get some more feedback, and see what people say. So here's where I ended up. I've added these brackets, these nice chunky, spiky brackets. They mimic some of the curves already existing on my architecture. I've got, of course, you got to have chains, and I've got some sweet lanterns. That'll also give me a nice light source. And I've also added these nice big metal brackets on the upper column here, and that helps out with that silhouette, adds a little bit extra detail. I've also got some pebbles going on, and I sculpted out a little bit of extra detail on the pedestal, and I've also sculpted out detail on that triangle up above, some kind of, I don't know, some symbol or something. And I've added in a lot more of those rocks at the base, some of those medium and small and large shapes. And I may still come back and make changes, but I need something more to inform me. I need the materials, and I need a lot of thought put into those materials. So I'm gonna leave it here. I'm gonna move on to materials for my next video series, and I may come back and make some changes to this. A piece is not done, a sculpt is not done until it's in game, and everyone, myself and everyone on the team and the art director is all signed off on it and happy with it. But that's a great thing about ZBrush. I can always go back in and make those changes really fast. But I need some more information. I need to know what those materials are and where the detail level and the noise level on those materials are going to be in order to make better choices about my sculpt. But I think this is a really great place to stop. And that's it. That's going to wrap this up. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. I'm glad I got to show some of my process and some of my technique. I hope I was clear, and I hope you learned a little something, or at least were entertained. If you have any other questions or comments, please contact me. I can always do a follow-up video. I want to make sure I answer everyone's questions.